Early warning signals. That's all you need to understand what is really happening in Dubai right now. In 2024, everything still looked normal on the surface, but beneath that polished image, something unusual had already begun. Small disruptions, quiet anomalies, signals that most people ignored, but they were already pointing forward. The United Arab Emirates ranked first globally for abandoned vessels, 42 ships left behind, drifting between ownership with no crews, no wages, and no direction. These were not just ships, they were symbols, massive floating assets, once worth millions, now turning into liabilities under pressure and uncertainty in global conditions. At the same time, thousands of luxury cars were being abandoned across Dubai every year. Not ordinary vehicles, but machines built to represent wealth and success. Some were left in parking garages, others in open desert areas, keys still inside, engines silent, as if their owners had simply disappeared overnight. This isn't normal behavior in a city built on status and display. People don't walk away from luxury unless something forces them to. And then came real estate, the backbone of Dubai's economic identity. By early 2026, demand had dropped sharply, with buyers stepping back at an alarming pace, a drop of nearly 45%. That's not a correction. That's a signal, a sign that confidence is starting to disappear from the system itself. You see, these events are not random, they are connected, pieces of a much larger shift happening quietly beneath the surface of a global hub. Dubai was built on movement, on speed, on the constant flow of people, money, and energy across borders. But that flow is beginning to slow. Luxury without movement becomes useless. A yacht that cannot sail, a car that cannot be driven, a property no one wants to buy. And when these symbols begin to lose value, it signals something deeper, not just an economic issue, but a structural shift in how the system operates. Because Dubai's entire model depends on perception, the idea that it is always growing, always safe, always desirable. But perception can change fast. When confidence breaks, everything follows. Investors hesitate, travelers rethink, and suddenly the unstoppable begins to look fragile. This is not yet a collapse, but it is the beginning of something far more important, a shift that started quietly long before anyone noticed. And now, those early warning signals are becoming impossible to ignore. Because what happens next is where everything changes. The signals stop being subtle. They begin to affect systems that keep the city alive every single day. At the center of it all lies a narrow strip of water, a place that controls movement, trade, and energy across the entire region. The Strait of Hormuz. Once a vital artery of global trade, now turning into a bottleneck under rising geopolitical pressure and military tension. For luxury yacht owners, this changes everything. What was once freedom across open seas now feels like confinement within invisible boundaries. Yachts worth hundreds of millions are no longer traveling. They remain docked, restricted, unable to follow seasonal routes across Europe and beyond. This is not just inconvenience. It's a collapse of a lifestyle, a system where wealth meant movement, now suddenly trapped in place. Then comes the cost. War risk insurance, once almost invisible, has surged dramatically, turning ownership into a financial burden almost overnight. Premiums that were once minimal now multiply rapidly. Millions spent annually just to keep assets stationary under protection and compliance. And that's not all. Even when idle, these yachts consume money. Cooling systems, maintenance crews, and operational costs never stop accumulating. The result is simple: continuous losses. Even for the ultra-wealthy. Assets that once symbolized power now draining resources without generating value. And when assets sit too long, they decay. Saltwater, heat, and time begin to erode value faster than markets can recover. Now look at Dubai's marinas, designed for activity, for prestige, for movement. Spaces built to showcase the peak of global wealth. But today, those same spaces feel different. Quieter, slower, almost disconnected from the energy they once carried so effortlessly. Events once attracting global elites are being postponed. Deals that once happened instantly are now delayed or completely canceled. Confidence is fading, not loudly, but gradually, and in markets built on perception, and that kind of silence is more dangerous than panic. Because Dubai was never just about infrastructure, it was about trust, the belief that everything here would keep moving forward without interruption. But now, that belief is being tested, and when trust begins to weaken, even the strongest systems start to feel unstable. The marinas were the first to show it, the first place where movement stopped and silence began to replace activity. And if the water has already gone quiet, what happens when the sky follows? And then it happened. The silence spread from the water to the sky. What was once constant motion above Dubai suddenly began to disappear. Airports that never slept started slowing down, then pausing, then stopping. The rhythm of departures and arrivals broke for the first time in years. Thousands of flights began disappearing from schedules. Not delays, not rescheduling. Complete cancellations, turning digital boards into walls of red warnings. More than numbers, these cancellations represent paralysis. A system designed for precision suddenly unable to function under growing pressure and uncertainty. Every minute an airport stands still, millions are lost. Revenue evaporates, connections break, and global movement begins to fracture at its core. Luxury terminals once filled with elite travelers now feel hollow. Spaces built for exclusivity now echo with absence and quiet emptiness. And then came the decisions. Major airlines began stepping back, not slowly, not cautiously, but with calculated withdrawal from an unstable environment. Carriers known for discipline and risk management started suspending routes long term, not days, not weeks, months of complete absence from Dubai skies. This wasn't a technical issue, it wasn't temporary weather, it was a shift in confidence, a signal that trust in the system was weakening. Because aviation runs on trust. Pilots trust routes, airlines trust stability, passengers trust safety. Remove that and everything begins to collapse. Dubai's entire model depends on connection. A central hub linking continents, a perfect bridge between east and west for global movement. But when those connections break, the hub loses purpose. A center without spokes becomes nothing more than an empty point on a map. Airlines began rerouting, choosing longer paths, avoiding risk zones, flying directly instead of relying on transit stops in uncertain regions. Passengers followed quickly, safety over convenience, certainty over speed. The logic of travel itself began to change in real time. What once made Dubai powerful now became its weakness. Geography, location, proximity to tension turning advantage into vulnerability overnight. And then the realization hit. This wasn't just disruption. This was replacement. The world was learning to operate without relying on Dubai. New centers began absorbing traffic, new routes forming, a new system quietly emerging while the old one struggled to adapt. Because when the sky closes, everything connected to it begins to collapse. Tourism, trade, movement, all tied to one fragile system. The airports were never just buildings. They were the engine, and now that engine is starting to stall. And if the sky has already gone quiet, what happens to everything built beneath it? And when the sky slows down, the impact doesn't stay in the air. It falls back to the ground into streets, buildings, and the lives of millions. Tourism begins to fade. Hotels that once operated at full capacity now struggle to fill rooms that were once booked months in advance. Luxury resorts reduce activity. Staff wait, services slow down. The energy that defined Dubai's hospitality industry starts to disappear quietly. Entertainment landmarks begin shutting down, not permanently, but under softer words. Renovation. Maintenance. Carefully chosen language to hide falling demand. Iconic locations lose their crowds. Spaces once filled with excitement now stand still, turning into empty structures without the people who gave them life. Because in reality, this isn't renovation, it's absence. A lack of visitors, a drop in interest, and a shift in global attention away from Dubai. Then comes real estate. Prices begin adjusting. Investors start exiting. Supply increases, while demand continues to fall, creating pressure across the market. Luxury apartments sit empty, entire floors without residents. Buildings glowing on the outside, but dark and silent within. This is where perception breaks. Dubai was built on the idea of constant growth. But when that belief weakens, the entire system feels unstable. At the same time, people begin to leave. Skilled professionals, executives, and investors quietly relocating to places they consider safer and more stable. Capital follows people. Money begins flowing elsewhere, toward emerging hubs, new opportunities and regions offering stability over spectacle. Cities like Singapore rise, new projects in Saudi Arabia expand rapidly, alternatives grow stronger as Dubai's position weakens. And then comes the deeper truth. This is not just a local issue, it's a global shift in how systems operate under pressure. Aviation becomes fragmented, no longer centered around one hub, instead spreading across multiple safer and more controlled regions. The era of one dominant crossroads is fading, replaced by flexibility, adaptability, and a focus on risk management over efficiency. Dubai didn't just lose flights, it lost something bigger. Its role as the center of global movement and connection. So now the question remains, is this temporary, a pause before recovery, or the beginning of a permanent transformation? Are global superhubs becoming obsolete, replaced by systems designed to survive instability instead of depending on perfection? Is this the start of a new geopolitical era in aviation, where safety and location matter more than luxury and speed? The skyline is still there, the buildings still stand, but the system behind them is changing in ways few expected. The map of the sky is changing, quietly, rapidly, and maybe permanently. The only question left is, are we ready for what comes next?